Hey there. So, there's some things lately that have come up for me that I really want to talk about now because I feel like they're important. I've been thinking a lot about foster care and how I felt going through that process. And how, as much as good as it was in a lot of ways, because they're helping kids take them out of their dysfunctional, traumatic home lives, there's also a lot of things that are going on that are causing trauma as well. Like when a kid goes from one foster home to another and are not told why they're going from one to another. And also, they're not being sat down and working with a counselor who's specific dealing with trauma or separation or anxiety or any of these issues that I know I went through as a foster child during a very critical time in my life, reaching teenager, my teenage years, which is usually, I mean, if teenage years weren't hard enough, then here you throw on being taken away from your family and not knowing what's happening. So I was just thinking about how there was a lot of issues I had because I still had these ideals in my head um, from when I was growing up. My dad used to take me to the fireworks every 4th of July. Every single 4th of July. We would, I'd be so excited to be going to the fireworks. Um, I used to get a new backpack every single school year. Well, when you go living with another family, hey, you can't guarantee those things are still going to happen. Those traditions that you had as a kid suddenly aren't happening anymore. And on top of feeling already disjointed because you're taken from your family, as traumatic as it is, those are the people you have lived with and raised you. If you're older, that is. If you're younger, it might be a little different. But for my situation, I was already 11, so I had a pretty decent attachment bond to my parents. As bad as it was sometimes. So I was never told how to appropriately get used to and adjust to someone else's rules or living with a different family. Luckily, I didn't have to change my religious beliefs or anything like that or deny who I was in order to live with certain families, but for some kids, that really is a reality. So, I really wish they sat me down and said, hey, you're going to be going to a different family now. Things might be different. Maybe we can talk through this and help you figure out, you know, how things are going to be from now on. Because the fact of the matter is, I held on to a lot of resentment because when 4th of July came around, here I was inside thinking, like, oh yeah, fireworks, I can't wait. And then to realize that what's important to me, because that's how I grew up, isn't important to the family that I'm living with now. Which, hey, nothing bad on them. That's just, hey, maybe they don't like fireworks very much. I know when I was living with my adopted parents, it was hard to go to fireworks because we had a child with autism. I didn't grow up with a child with autism, I grew up, being treated like uh, the only child sometimes because I lived with my dad and my brother was older and lived with my mom. So if I wanted to do something, it was like, okay, the only thing to ask was where, when, how. And usually I'd get my way. So because I was still young at that point, living with my adoptive parents, and no one said to me, hey, you're gonna have to deal with this, and I'm sorry that we can't do this. It doesn't mean we don't love you. It means that physically we can't. And I don't necessarily know if I would have gotten that at 13 because, you're 13. There are some very intelligent 13-year-olds, and I think that in a lot of ways I was intelligent, but in a lot of other ways too, I didn't comprehend. I didn't understand, why can't I do this? I saw it as, well, you just don't care about me that much, or my feelings, my traditions, what I want really doesn't matter all that much. And of course, you're very rebellious as a teen, and I definitely was rebellious as a teen, so, it was just a lot to cope with, a lot to deal with at that age. And I do hope to be a mentor at some point, either for True Colors or the DCF system. I don't know when or any of those details, but I think that it would be good for me because I do know what it feels like, at least somewhat. Of course, everyone's situation in DCF is a little different because no one is being pulled for the same reasons. No one is getting the same foster care experience extravaganza. I was very lucky to be with people who didn't abuse me or call me names or neglect me or anything like that. I was always fed, and like I said, I didn't have to strip myself of my own identity in order to live with different people. But some kids aren't that lucky, so I do think, though, in some regards, that I would be a good mentor for kids like that who have had to deal with certain things that I have. Because maybe I could be the one that can sit down with those kids and say, tell me how you feel. Because I might know, and maybe I can give them some advice and say, that's normal because I had the same ideas when I was your age or when I was in this situation, or I have learned from living that never disregard your experiences, no matter how menial or ridiculous or hard they seem. You can connect to somebody. Somebody out there will connect to your story. And that's why I don't keep my mouth shut anymore. If somebody wants to know I'm trans, okay? Maybe knowing that I'm trans will help them understand. Maybe knowing that I was in foster care will help someone who is in foster care or understand that kids in foster care aren't all delinquents. It's not their fault. Or maybe, having parents that were addicts, maybe I can, telling my story in that way, I can relate to people. And maybe that will give them hope that things can get better. They can get better. I don't know. This was my rant for the day. Hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Peace.